Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social, democratic alternative for the politically homeless. I'm Sebastian Moore.
And I'm Hilary.salt.
And today we're joined by Alastair Donald, who is the co-convenor of the Battle of Ideas Festival and the organiser of Living Freedom. Welcome, Alastair.
Hello, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Here in the flesh. It's nice, isn't it? Proper guest, isn't it?
It is. It's nice to do it in person. So you're here in Manchester because tomorrow there's a Debating Matters event. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you can just tell people that don't know what is Debating Matters, and also how did you get involved in all this?
Yeah, well, Debating Matters, set up in 2003. It's a schools debating competition, set up originally by the Academy of Ideas, but recently, over the last 6 years or so, has been organised by Ideas Matter, which is an educational charity which does several projects, Living Freedom, which maybe we'll come on to, the Academy, which is a summer school that happens every year, which we're just organising just now. It takes place in early July. This year, it's going to focus on political language, which is quite an interesting topic, given it causes so much controversy at the moment. And Debating Matters, as I say, schools debating competition. It's in Blackburn College tomorrow with 6 schools from the Northwest who will all be competing around, I think there's 2 qualifying rounds and then 3 qualifying rounds actually, and then a final. And they will be hopefully busy just now studying their topic guides, because when they debate tomorrow, they'll be doing some quite tricky issues, things like should smartphones be banned. So topics for Debating Matters are of the moment, and we encourage them to read around the topic so that when they come to debate each other in the championship, they can not only deliver a pre-prepared 3-minute speech, but they can respond on their feet to some questions from a series of judges and also from the audience, and cross-examine each other. So it's a really nice schools debating competition that hopefully prepares young people for the journey into the adult world, where they have to stand on their own 2 feet and think a bit for themselves.
I'm sure the contestants will be having their last-minute jitters today.
Yeah, possibly, yes, but that's no bad thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Being nervous is not. It shows you think it's important, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I never did anything like this when I was younger, and I think it's an amazing thing. And I think we should be putting far more emphasis on oratory and an ability to speak in front of crowds. I think that's excellent.
Yeah, but also the thing that I think distinguishes Debating Matters from other schools debating competitions, and there are a number, is that actually the emphasis is not just on the oratory and the rhetorical flourishes and all the rest of it, although obviously being able to make your argument in a comprehensible fashion doesn't help. It doesn't, it's a good
start.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
But the emphasis really for us is on the substance of the issue or the style that it's delivered in, and that's always been the case actually. So that's why we pick topics that are very of the moment, because we want people to really grapple with the important issues of the day in a way that because we allocate the side of the debate for the schools, so they don't necessarily get to choose the side of the argument that they personally believe in, but we want them to read around the argument in a way that they both familiarise themselves with their side of the argument, but also the other side. They have to know their opponent's arguments as well as they know their own. And in a situation like today's world, where we far too often live in echo chambers where you don't really engage with people that think anything different of you, then making sure that you know as much about your opponent's arguments as they know is a good thing in and of itself.
I think a lot of younger people especially feel a bit lost and at sea, don't they, in the politics world at the moment. And I know when we asked you what you wanted to speak about, you were suggesting maybe we talk a little bit about the vibe shift. Shall we move on to that and maybe let's explore a bit what is that and why is that and why is it a problem?
Yeah, well, the vibe shift, this relates obviously to the election of Donald Trump again in America, and what his desire to introduce basically a new politics has been termed the vibe shift. And one of the things that we've been thinking about, because I am doing some programming just now of various different events, is how it is that we discuss the new Trump era, Trump 2.0, as it were. What's going on in America? What are the potential influences in discussion and debate and politics and culture in Europe? So we've been trying to work that out. I mean, everyone is trying to work it out just now, and it's not easy because he's come in and it's been an absolute whirlwind ever since. It's a little bit like being back 4 years ago in his last term of office, where the UK sleeps and then you wake up in the morning, you open the newspaper and you sort of wonder what's gone on overnight, because you know that for sure something will have gone on. And arguably some good things have happened. I don't know about you, but I thought the J.D. Vance speech at the Munich Security Conference was a very good speech.
Yes, Sebastian featured that in one of our podcasts.
Right.
Said exactly that. Yeah.
Okay.
I said last week how I received a bit of stick from some of my family because of seemingly praising J.D. Vance, and they said, "How can you praise this guy? He's awful."
Yes.
That's what it's like to talk about politics in 2025, isn't it? If you say something good about somebody, the people that don't like that person will come after you.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to listen to the content of the speech personally before deciding what you think of it. And obviously, or maybe not obviously, but there's definitely things that J.D. Vance have said that I don't agree with.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy to be critical on those occasions. But on that particular speech, I thought it was very well done in that conference hall full of potentially very hostile audience, which he dealt with very well. And you talked about oratory earlier. I mean, that was a fine example of oratory. I thought it was very well delivered, but the content was very good as well, and particularly the emphasis I thought on perhaps the threat in European countries is not so much external to the countries as internal in terms of what's going on here, and he cited the particular examples of free speech, and he gave a brief tour of Europe and named a few examples of where we weren't standing up for free speech. So I thought that was impressive, and there's other things that Trump's new regime have come in and done. That I thought the executive order to stop trans men taking part in women's sport.
Trans women.
I always mix it up.
I know. Everyone's confused.
Yes, so it was a good move.
Yeah.
There's been other things that he's done which again have I suppose emphasised free speech. The seeming attempt to dismantle some of the DEI industry. I think has been to some very positive, at least in the sentiment and in what it's trying to do. I worry a little bit that lots of this has been done by executive order. Congress seems to have gone completely missing in this term, and he's got a majority in Congress, so obviously it would seem not confident enough in what he wants to do to draw in the elected body and bring them along with his decision making, which I don't think is good for democracy. So there are cautions, and then there's been situations in America again where you think, well, you've just if it's Vance, you've just given this great speech on free speech, and yet some of what you seem to be doing in America is falling short of the standards that he seemed to set himself. And I'm thinking of things now like the decision. Well, it's not a decision yet, but he's pushing along the way to deporting some of the pro-Palestine students and protesters, which it's done on the basis of visa statuses and citizenship, and there's this discussion as to whether Mohammed Khalis, who's probably the one that's really been most in the news, whether he's here legitimately and did he fill in his documents correctly, and then also has he, in terms of his actions over the last year or so since October the 7th, has he contravened the obligations that his status puts on him? I think. I mean, I'm very, very strongly for free speech, and I think really this is a worrying issue, because it shows that perhaps they're not going to stand up for free speech that they don't like. And I think at this particular moment, when we've seen a bit of a shift from. Someone like myself has spent, years and years critical of the left and liberals, progressives, who have been at the forefront of cancel culture, or don't even, or purport not to recognise that there even is a free speech problem. So I've been very critical of that side, but it seems worryingly like there's a danger that people on the right are starting to copy some of the bad habits of their opponents. And at this point it does feel particularly important to take a very principled stand on free speech and say, well, the first speech that you really need to defend is the speech of those that you disagree with.
So how do we navigate our way in a world where, because we used to have like goodies over here and baddies over there, and you kind of knew what the goodies thought and you kind of knew what the baddies thought, and now Vance can open his mouth and he can say something fantastic, or he can say something awful. And how do we kind of find our way and, find our kind of a North Star to know where we're going in that kind of a world?
Well, if we stick to the free speech issue, then I suppose one of the things that needs to be done, and this is hopefully something that we try to do a lot actually in the events that we organise, particularly the summer school Living Freedom, which is I'm organising just now. But I think one of the important things just now is almost that you break people out of the present moment, because we tend to be so consumed by what's going on at the moment in the time that we live in, that it becomes sometimes a little bit difficult to get a historical perspective on what's going on. And I think one of the things that I'm doing just now in programming the summer school is trying to think about how it is that we can give a sense of understanding to how we've arrived where we are just now. Because the thing about the current moment being also consuming is that we don't really seem to have much of a sense of the future anymore. But also the thing that's really happened in the past 10, 15, 20 years is that we seem increasingly to cut ourselves off from the past. So history's become this kind of reductionist thing that's just full of these nasty old white men that were colonialists or imperialists or whatever. We don't really want to know about them because they're not really very nice guys.
You've been reading about that, haven't you, Sebastian?
Yes. Is this Peter Hitchens?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm reading the Abolition of Britain.
Okay.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't, no.
Yeah, and he's talking about education, certainly in the chapter I've just been reading today, about how education has become, and this was written in 1999, so it sort of predates a lot of these culture war issues. But probably he was talking about the onset of them. And he specifically, within education, he's talking about how there is a child-centred focus on education where it's discovery-led. So you say to the children, you discover the information. And we've got away from this idea of teaching kids about history and teaching them about their historical background, which kind of roots them in where they are right now.
Yeah.
Why is that important to think about our history and to take a step back from our present moment?
Well, I think if you don't have a sense of history, then it's very difficult to understand where you are in the current moment, because it's only by seeing how things change that you really understand the here and now. And indeed, you only really understand how it is that you might go about creating the future, because there's a continuum between past, present, and future. So I think the danger in cutting yourself off is that you become completely disoriented. And I don't even mean that in the sense of you need to support or enthuse about all of the history that you've been through. I mean, there'll be things that you can be justifiably proud of, and there'll be things that you think are terrible episodes in history. But they've happened, they're history, and we in some way relate to them, whether it's to try and embrace some of the best things and provide a sense of continuity in those things, or to take the decision that we want to do something different. But you need to know what it is about history at a level of detail before you can actually take that decision. And I think the thing that you mentioned about the kind of discovery mode of education is that teachers, and more broadly the education system in general, unfortunately, have become scared of teaching history. They've become, to some extent, it reflects a kind of politicized disdain for certain things that happen, often in a way that's actually about making a point about the present rather than the past, as it happens. And then for other people, there's a kind of loss of confidence as well in being able to teach this, because if you look at the way that schools or universities are just now, then a teacher who's perhaps of a more conservative bent, who wants to emphasise certain aspects of conservative history, just knows that they're going to be jumped upon by those of the opposite opinion. So there's no sense that there's a space to explore these things properly with intellectual depth, and you end up with kind of sound bites, or even completely overlooking what's happened in history completely, because you end up in the fictional world of a kind of decolonized history where these nasty, often old, pale male stale types didn't, they were bad, and so you try and write them out the picture. Well, the reality is that, and free speech as an issue more than anything, the reality is that actually lots of the key historical thinkers were these reasonably pale, stale old men, but they actually had some quite important thoughts, and they're worth engaging with, not even necessarily because, if you take someone like J.S. Mill, for example, who's in many ways often thought to have created the kind of Bible of freedom. I'm not particularly into Bibles myself in that sense, but one of the mainstay texts of how we think about freedom and free speech today. And I don't think you necessarily have to today, when you read that book, accept everything that's in it, but there's lots of really useful ideas in there, some of which have in a different context 150 years later or whatever, some things make a lot of sense still, and other things you think, well, things have slightly changed, so that was a good idea then, but we might have to adapt it and reinterpret it a bit for today. But at least we know what it was, and at least then we can go about engaging with the reinterpretation.
Do you think this problem of lack of perspective, certainly historically, does that cut across the political spectrum? Because I know you were talking about the erasure of history from maybe an anti-colonial perspective. Is there another one, which is people on the right, if we can call it that, not being aware enough of their history?
I think there probably is, yes, but it not to the same extent, I'd argue, because the rejection of history on the left has been so explicit, partly because history is tied up with tradition, and one of the missions of the left and the progressive side in recent years has been to break contemporary society from its history. It's been to sever those ties and to leave a more something that's a bit more freer for them to remodel And you can see that, and you can see it in the education system actually, because what kids are receiving is a very modern set of instructions as to how it is to behave, and it's convenient that teachers or the education system doesn't have to deal with the kind of awkward questions of the past.
So we've talked a lot about what the problems are and why people maybe feel very adrift and, hard to find a political way through, the circumstances we're in at the moment. Well, what some of you've kind of already started suggesting some of the solutions. Reread Mill, perhaps.
Oh, and a lot of other stuff as well.
You assume we've read Mill already.
Oh, Sebastian, I can't believe you've not. That's another book I'll have to bring in. Okay. Yeah. What else? What are the other solutions?
Well, I think discuss and debate things is one of the main things, and genuinely discuss and debate things, not just in a sort of flippant sense of going through the motions, but actually be prepared to question everything, and particularly actually the ideas that you might be a bit more sympathetic to. I mean, that's when I was talking earlier about the problem of the more MAGA style seeming restrictions. I mean, in some senses, I'm instinctively sympathetic to the people that have pushed back against the progressive side in recent years. But that's no reason to throw out your critical faculties and not be as absolutely as critical of what's going on just now, because that would be really disarming of us. And I think the need for a principled stance around things like freedom of free speech means that you necessarily have to have that. So I suppose what we try to do at the summer school is as I said, a little bit of the kind of going back, a bit of history and philosophy and some key thinkers, and we look at them with a point of view of not just saying you must learn that by rote because that's a good text and holy text, but more can we use it today? What can we take from it today that will help us, rather than it is necessarily to be consumed lock, stock and barrel. And then secondly, we're very interested in trying to grapple with some of the contemporary dilemmas around freedom and free speech. And there is a modern set of problems. I mean, one of the issues that I'm programming into the summer school just now is around escaping the straitjacket of well-being and mental health, which is a very important. I mean, I think perhaps the most important issue in terms of young people and how they're making their way in the world. I mean, even if you look at something like, if you've seen the news this week about the decision by the Office for Students to give a reasonably substantial fine to the University of Sussex, which has treated someone like Kathleen Stock dreadfully, in my opinion.
What was the fine for?
So the fine was for them not implementing policies around free speech properly. It's complicated. Actually,
it is quite complicated
when you start to look at the decision, it does actually relate back to a period of 2018-19 and what was going on then. But they found that through the imposition of, I suppose, early types of DEI policies that the university did not operate in a way where students were really free to think and express what it is that they thought. So they've been fined substantially. But the interesting part of this week has been, in addition to the fine itself and someone taking a stance against universities that don't live up to those sort of academic freedom expectations, free speech expectations, but the response from the now Vice Chancellor has been incredible as well, because she's obviously furious at the fine and is basically going to challenge the decision. and accuses the Office for Students and I suppose ultimately the government of wanting a free speech absolutism within universities. On the base, and her problem with it is that she thinks that young people are not robust enough, resilient enough to withstand certain types of lawful speech. And this is such a common thing just now. This is the legitimating factor for so many of the restrictions on free speech, is this idea that people are not robust enough to be able to handle arguments. They can't deal with words that might sting a little. They can't really make their way without the protection of administrators in the university who might put trigger warnings on books to tell them to be a little bit wary of reading that text and not to, So there's a sort of paternalism within university these days that is predicated on young people's inability to make their own way, to be independent, young, critical thinkers, and how you get out of that is a really tricky issue.
And you've mentioned the summer school a few times. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, the kind of practicalities of it? So when is it, where is it, what is it?
Yes, well, this is Living Freedom Summer School. It takes place in central London, 26th to the 28th of June. It's open to anybody aged 18 to 30, so students or young people who are working or whatever it is that they're doing. It's open to people of 18 to 30. It requires a short application to us, and then there's a selection panel, and there'll be around about 60 to 70 people there for 3 days. And we'll be running around about 15 different sessions where there'll be lectures, there'll be seminars, there'll be workshops on all topics related to freedom and free speech. And it's both intellectually, it's challenging, it's quite an intense experience. Everybody's there quite excited, ready to discuss and debate things, and we generally have a very nice mixture of people who are not actually all from the same political perspective. Their backgrounds are often very, very different. Some have been to university, others haven't. Their politics are developing, often evolving. So it's an intellectual boot camp really for
Superb.
young people interested in freedom. So anybody from listening to the podcast, that would be.
And we have some special news, don't we, Sebastian?
Yeah, so firstly we'll put a link to Living Freedom in the show notes, so if anybody wants to, they can go and click on that and apply. And also,
there's a very special offer, an opportunity to Take Me Home listeners. We have funded 2 free places to Living Freedom. So if you want to apply for those, just mention in the application that you're a listener to Take Me Home. And Alastair and his team will pick out 2 winners from the Take Me Home listeners, and you will be able to get a free place and attend free and gratis. So you have something to bring to Culture Club this week.
I do, a rarity. Can we call this culture? I think so. I went to the football on Friday night. So I'm a Coventry City fan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my father is responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
Having to support,
as fathers often are in these matters.
Having to support a team that hasn't always done so well. I think when I first started supporting Coventry, they just got relegated from the Premier League, and it just kind of went downhill from there. But they've started to do a lot better recently under Frank Lampard as manager. And I went to see them in Sheffield because I have family over there, and we couldn't get tickets for the Coventry end, but luckily my brother knows somebody and we managed to sit in the Sheffield end, which was excruciating.
Oh dear.
Because I got really nervous when I went in. I thought, it suddenly dawned on me, not only can I not sort of celebrate and cheer when Coventry score, but I have to actually pretend to be happy when Sheffield score.
You do.
And unfortunately Sheffield scored 3 times. without response until very, very late on in stoppage time. And every time I sort of got up and did this. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is that football, I think, is such an important part of culture here in the UK.
Yeah.
I think we're a proper footballing country.
I think me and Alastair probably don't want to talk to each other at this stage too much.
Why not?
Do you want to admit
No, you can.
your allegiances?
My
Alastair?
allegiances are to Liverpool Football Club.
Okay, I have a soft spot for Liverpool. As a child,
That's
wanting
the
to
right
support,
answer.
Wanting to support a successful team, I did cheer on Liverpool. Sorry, Hilary.
Okay.
It's it further this way now. No, but I think it's such a big thing in the UK. And one thing that was really, really uplifting is that this match I went to see on Friday, it's the first match I've been to this season. And I was struck by how many women there were in the stadium, in the stands.
A woman's place is at the match.
Very good. And how many children there were, and how friendly the atmosphere was. Because it's something that when I was, I'm not that old, but when I was a kid, it was still fairly antagonistic, the atmosphere, and it didn't feel particularly safe. And I remember my dad saying to me many times that he was nervous when he'd take us to the game. But now it feels just like it's completely changed. And I know that change has been going on for a while, but it felt like a really enjoyable thing to do. So I think that's really good. It opens it up to a lot more people. Do you know the average attendance at the championship game this season?
Championship, 18,000.
21,000.
Okay, not too
And
far.
it's the highest average attendance for any league that's not the first division in a country. So English football has the highest average attendance when you balance it out of all leagues. And I think it's something that, it's just worth doing, worth going to, even if you don't support a team.
In many things cultural, Sebastian, you and I completely disagree. And I miss the testerone rush at football.
Righty.
I kind of miss that really edgy atmosphere.
Yeah.
You're right, it has gone. I go to Old Trafford, as you know, and
It's got a bit
it's
of
gone
an
from
edgy
there.
atmosphere these days.
So I'll give you an
It's
example.
more
There was-
relegation fear, I suppose.
Well, that
There
kind
we
of
go.
edgy, but there's very little. There's not a lot of singing. There's not a lot of ribbing the opposition. There's not new songs created because of something somebody did last week. All that kind of banter you used to get at football. A lot of that has gone now.
I've never been that into the chants and all of the things you talk about, which I mean, fine, it's quite enjoyable at times, but I'd prefer to be watching the match. And so often, even at this game, you have one guy that was deciding just to spend his whole time shouting at the opposition fans, not even watching the match. And I know that there's a lot of people in my life that wouldn't go to the football because that's what they think football is. So to see it a slightly different and friendlier atmosphere, I thought was really good.
Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree, as we do often. Alastair, you wanted to talk about something else that probably has a more civilised audience as well, didn't you?
Well, when you asked me to do this,
Yeah.
my first thought was I've spent a lot more time in football grounds this year than I have in the cinema or an art gallery.
We like to use culture in a very inclusive way. I kind of think if you put all the culture clubs from Take Me Home together, you will know what it means to be British. So we talk about all kinds of things.
I have to say I've corrected that a little bit over the weekend, actually, because I've been to a couple of very good things,
Well
which
done.
I should actually just probably give a little plug to. Because,
Yes, please do.
One of them was the opening of a new exhibition at the JW3 Centre in North London, which is tied to, so this is a very short exhibition, only on for 3 days, but it's tied to a conference that's taking place on contemporary anti-Semitism. And this was a very impressive exhibition curated by Manik Govinda, who I think might be known in this SDP parish,
Yes,
possibly.
indeed,
And Mina Kupferman. And they just put together this reasonably short notice, very, very impressive exhibition, which I suppose people won't be able to see now, but is impressive enough that it shouldn't go into storage for long, and hopefully it gets another airing, because it was very good. And then I also went to the National Gallery.
Okay.
To see an exhibition on Siena, a painting from 1300 to 1350, which is on for the next few months, and I would recommend anybody and everybody goes and sees that, because it was really fantastic exhibition. Siena often sort of lives in the shadow of Florence a little bit, so the art of this period was actually very, very important, and these painters were particularly important in the development of painting, and they're beautiful paintings, quite religious themes, but actually it's the human elements of them that are particularly interesting, and they're, I suppose the dawn of the Renaissance, and they're a fantastic exhibition.
Are there any painters we'd know?
Probably they actually weren't star names, but the work that it's the work that was brilliant, and it's there's things like Siena was on the Silk Road, so there's the early appearing of textiles, very, very intricate textiles, which are then the patterns are incorporated into the paintings. It was so impressive.
Wow. Great. Well, again, we'll put the show notes. We'll put the link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Great.
Brilliant.
So thanks, Alastair. Thanks very much for coming to see us. As I say, it's good to have a real live guest, isn't it?
It is.
Try to schedule in some more.
Yeah, I'm
guests
much
in
for
person.
in person.
Yeah.
We need to do more things in person, I think.
Exactly.
Less screen time. That's my
Thank you very much for having me.
suggestion.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and if you've enjoyed, make sure you like, share, and subscribe.
Well done. And don't forget to apply if you're 18 to 30 for your free place on Living Freedom.
Cheers.
See you next time.